Hi guys, it's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and today I have something a little bit different for all of you. I was recently talking to a friend of mine, an ASMR creator by the name of Pyrit ASMR Gamer. Some of you might know her, but if you don't, you should absolutely go check out her stuff because she has some fantastic tingly content, especially some amazing like video game unboxing videos with lots of collector's editions and things like that, which I really enjoy personally. And if you'd like to check her out, link down in the video description, of course, and I'll pop up a link to her channel here at the end of this video as well. So, anyway, Pirit and I got to talking recently, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun to do a collab video where we talk about our favorite childhood games? You know, those games that you have like so much nostalgia for and that were sort of formative in your gaming experiences and in your life. So here we are. And we've done this as sort of a back and a forth where we each take a turn talking about our favorite games from our childhood that had the biggest impact on us and that we have lasting memories of. So, without further ado, I will pass it over to Pirit to tell you guys about her first favorite childhood game.
Hey Nick, how are you doing? Hopefully good. And I have something that I was wondering about a couple days ago, and I really wanted to ask, what is your favorite childhood game? It is a really interesting question to give, like, a big gamers that I know how and with what they grew up. And I know that it may be really hard to pick just one title. Usually, when people ask me this question, at least three titles pop up in my mind. But definitely, the first game I can think about is like the first game that I ever played, and it's Pitfall for Atari 2600. And I know it sounds a little bit silly because I'm pretty young, or like I am pretty young for Atari 2600. And when I was a little child, there were already different and more advanced consoles. But the reason why my first game was on Atari is simply because we were really poor, and this was the only thing that my parents had money for. So that's pretty much it, and I'm really thankful because without this, I would grow without any games at all, besides like table games. So anyway, it sort of happened that I grew up with the Pitfall Harry, which is the main character's name, and you are just a small man in a jungle. Well, at least they tried to make it look like you are in a jungle, because these were the times before circles and also before the advanced graphics and stuff. So there are a lot of greens, browns, and there are usually like 3 or 4 trees on the screen, and sometimes there are even crocodiles like squarey crocodiles. But you know, at the time I was really lucky because we had no PC, no internet. The only thing we had TV, so I had no idea that there are much, you know, much more better looking games. So for me, it was incredible. There was this little man and he was jumping and stuff. So it was it was amazing, really. And so it's a side scroller. It is as basic as you can get, and the main goal is to collect 32 treasures in 20 minutes time limit. And this is probably the time when my childhood got completely ruined because I had no idea that there is this time limit. There was like no manual in the game, and they were just like, I was a little child and there were numbers all around the screen, so I had no idea. I have probably never finished the game, but it was still really fun. So while collecting these treasures, like usually it's a piece of gold or a sack of money, you need to avoid, obstacles. Like it's like in normal life. So I remember um, that there are just like this pits of sand and I don't know, fire, snakes, Scorpios, and of course my favorite, crocodiles, and also, don't know, beds filled with water that will randomly appear in front of you and stuff. And yeah, usually you have to just like, you know, jump across them, but sometimes you can even use lianas, which was also really cool. And when you climbed up the liana, there were this really annoying sound effect. Okay, oh god, I remember it like it was yesterday. And this was pretty much it. The thing I have enjoyed the most in this game was the cheating. Like it was not really a cheating because it was so obvious and so easy. But for example, the crocodiles. You have to jump from them before they open their mouths. If you are standing on his head and he opens his mouth, you are simply dead. But there was this one really special spot on his head, and if you stand on that very precise spot, you were not dead even if the crocodile opened his mouth. Of course, you had to be really precise, and at the same time, you mustn't fall into the water or it's like instant death. But it was really cool. And other thing, which was I was amazed when I found out, but usually you start at the left or on the screen and you run to the right. But there was this option you can just turn around and just run left. So you basically start from the end of the game and you are running to the start. And I have never finished this game like either way, right or left, but I think it's possible to both ways. So it was incredible. And it was stupid and it haven't looked really cool. Like, there were some just squares and there was no variety in the obstacles, and also sometimes it was impossible to know what it really is. It took me like 10 years to find out that these small white guys on the bottom of the screen were Scorpios, so but I really loved it. So I'm really curious what was your childhood game and if you had problems like I had. But it was cool. I had to really use my imagination, and the snakes were also really strange looking. I guess that I thought that it's something completely different back then, but you know, kids' imagination. So now it's your turn. You have to tell me what was your first ever game or first favorite game.
Okay, Pyrit, I promise I'll tell you in just a moment what my favorite childhood game was, because apparently I have to. But before I do, I just wanted to say that I think it's really cool that you grew up playing games on an Atari 2600, because that gave you the opportunity to gain an appreciation for a lot of really classic games from the early days of gaming, like Pitfall, for example, that you wouldn't have otherwise played, probably, and that lots of people gaming now probably haven't played. And that gives you kind of a unique perspective, a historical perspective on video games, which maybe is part of why you enjoy games so much now. I don't know. You can let me know if that's the case, but I just think it's really cool that you grew up playing some of those older games. I myself, I never had an Atari 2600, and in fact, I didn't try out Pitfall until much later in life, using an emulator. But like you, I didn't have any fancy modern consoles while I was growing up. And so what I ended up doing was playing games on PC a lot. My dad had a DOS PC, a 386, that he used for work, but of course, being a kid, I found ways to use it for gaming. And well, the first game that I remember playing a lot of uh, was actually Solitaire. I played so much Solitaire on that PC, because it was dual booting. It had, I guess, or not dual booting, but whatever. It had Windows 3, 3.1, I guess it was on it, and that was a pack-in with Windows. Um, and I guess still is to this day, probably. I don't know. So I played a lot of Solitaire, but that's not what I want to talk about right now, because you can only say so much about Solitaire. But my real favorite early game that I played a lot of was a side-scrolling platformer called Hocus Pocus. And this game came out in 1994. And some of you watching right now, may have seen me play it on my channel, because I did a couple of videos with it, and one day maybe I'll go back to that series and finish up at least World 1, because I think I had one more video to finish up World 1, but we'll see. I've got so many other videos to do. But at any rate, Hocus Pocus was this awesome platformer game where you played as a wizard, the titular Hocus Pocus, and you were progressing through these levels. There were, I think, 36 levels in total, spread across 4 different worlds, and they were all these different fantasy settings, stuff like sort of the pyramids, or like an ice world, or like a castle, medieval castle, and some other weirder stuff in addition. But one of the coolest things about Hocus Pocus that I really loved was that there was some amount of freedom over how you approached the levels, because the goal wasn't to just go from like left to right. The goal was to collect crystals. So each level had a set number of crystal orbs. And in many levels, you could collect these crystals in any order you wanted. So there was this element of freedom that wasn't common in platformers at that time, I don't think. Anyway, in retrospect, I don't think it was. Although at the time, I guess I wouldn't have known because I had nothing really to compare it to. But um, later in my childhood, we did eventually get a hand-me-down NES, and I got a Game Boy, and off I went from there. But at this time, when I was playing Hocus Pocus for hours and hours on end, I didn't have really other platformers to compare it to. So, but I just knew that it felt really cool that I could kind of explore through these levels and approach them in different ways, and one playthrough might be a little different than the next. And in addition to collecting these crystals, you were collecting treasure, and each level had like a treasure bonus for collecting all the treasure and a time bonus for completing it in a set amount of time. And so there was a bit of a score chase element to it as well, if you wanted to try and get like a high score or whatever. So that was kind of cool. But what I loved the most really was just these fantastical environments and the weird creatures that you encountered. And of course, the creatures tried to kill you because that's what happens in video games, right? The murder simulators. And so you're fighting these creatures, you're throwing your magic lightning bolts. There were power-ups that would give you like rapid fire lightning bolts. And there was another power-up that would give you like this crazy like fireball kind of thing. You'd only get 3 shots with it, but it would like penetrate through enemies. And so you could just blow away a whole screen of enemies with this one awesome fireball shot. And you were just talking about how you like to do this sort of cheat thing with Pitfall where you'd stand in a specific spot on the crocodiles' heads. And one of my enduring memories from Hocus Pocus was discovering the cheat for infinite numbers of these crazy fireballs. And it was banana. That was the cheat. You just typed banana in, and you got an unlimited stack of these things. And so I had a heck of a lot of fun just destroying everything in those levels with those fireballs. But like I said, these really cool locations as well, which are in my memory forever. They just felt so exotic, and some of them felt really alien. And I remember getting to like the final bosses, because each of the worlds had a final boss, and they were so scary and intimidating for me when I was whatever 6 years old or whatever I was. And I just remember feeling so triumphant when I finally beat the bosses at the end of a world, which was really cool. But also, like you were saying, sometimes it was really hard to tell what these creatures were supposed to be, because, again, it was these exotic locales, these fantasy creatures. I still don't know to this day what some of them were supposed to be, because they were just weird. But maybe if I went back and played all the way through, I'd recognize some things that I didn't. Obviously, as you've been seeing up here, the graphics in Hocus Pocus, not quite as primitive as those in Pitfall. There's more detail, more color, more pixels, because it did come out quite a bit later. But anyway, yeah, Hocus Pocus is probably my first most enduring gaming memory. And I have so much nostalgia for it, and perhaps one of these days I'll get around to finishing that little series here on my channel. We'll see. You guys let me know down in the comments, I guess, if that's something you're interested in. So that's my first game, but Pyrit, I would like to hear about some of the other games that you really loved during your childhood.
Well, first of all, it is really a shame that I did not had a chance to play Hocus Pocus when I was a little kid, because since I was able to read and since my imagination started working, I was obsessed with fantasy lands and magical creatures, also magic. So my imagination would transform this game into something truly magical. And you know, when you consider the fact that I was able to spend hours and not hours, weeks and months with a few green and brown pixels, I would be obsessed with this game. But as you have already said, we had nothing to compare it to, and I think that it was for a good, because this way we were actually able to enjoy any game to the fullest without any type of prejudice or high expectations. Which also brings me to the other thing you were talking about, that maybe because my first game was something so ancient, that it may be the reason why I actually love and enjoy video games up to this day so much. And I think that this may be it, because thanks to that, I am actually able to enjoy older games and newer games equally, which many people these days can't. So, but I'm thankful for that. And of course, Hocus Pocus had many advantages compared to Pitfall. But one thing, one thing really stands out and shine, and it's the fact that you were able to murder someone. And it may sound funny, but it's true, and kids love it. It's action and you know, but it's actually really strange that the next game that comes to my mind is a puzzle game with absolutely no action and no murder at all. And it was also a time, uh, about the time when my parents finally decided to buy a computer. The reason for this was also that I was at the age that I already needed it for my schoolwork and stuff, and they also bought it so other kids won't laugh at me. But anyway, of course, even I have spent massive time playing solitaire and all those card games that were available. And don't make me even started about Microsoft Paint. I have spent all days just drawing, and it looked, well, really blah. But it was fun. And I also got a few games. Uh, they, mm, like the significant part of them were just a cheap rip-offs of original games, and the other part were amazingly boring educational puzzle games. We all know them. But this was also a time when I fell in love with Sokoban. So, my Sokoban was actually not the original Sokoban. It was another cheap rip-off that I got maybe from my uncle, I guess. But when I looked it up, the levels are actually identical to the original Sokoban game. The only difference were the colors. My version was more colorful. There were just like a lot of reds and greens, and it was all bright and stuff. And also, instead of the guy, there was white rabbit pushing the boxes. So, yeah, but it was really simple transform puzzle game. It was simple, not easy because the basic principle was really simple. You have to push those boxes on specific places. Those places are marked with those small dots, and that's it. That's simply it. And it sounds incredibly boring, but as you continue playing the game, it actually gets harder and harder to get those boxes onto those places because you get more boxes or it's more difficult. And you also need to be careful not to get your boxes on dead spots, or when you get it in the corner or stuck in other boxes, you won't be able to get it out. And also, you need to be careful not to get stuck yourself, because sometimes you may push the boxes to the point where you have actually blocked your own way out. So, yeah, and it gets really difficult. I got like stuck for hours and I was not able to solve those really difficult levels. But the harder it gets, the more satisfying it is to actually complete it. So for me, for some strange reason, this was absolutely the most fun. Uh, and yeah, I have spent weeks playing this game, and it was also good that I was allowed to play this game. My parents would not let me to play games as much. They wanted me to read and to study, but this was actually a game that trained your brain to, work differently, and you were actually learning to solve those puzzles. So they actually let me to play this game more than the other games. And that's pretty much it. It's really it's really simple. But sometimes those simple and easy games may be more entertaining than, realistic action games with advanced graphics. And that's the beauty of it. When you are a small child, you can appreciate things that won't be enough for you when you are older and you have something to compare it to. So, but I guess that's pretty much it I can tell about the game. You have to play it to understand why it's so entertaining, and it's really simple. And yeah, so this was my second game. So is there anything that comes to your mind? Because I would like to know.
Sokoban is a great choice for one of your favorite childhood games, and it's a game that I actually played when I was younger as well, although it wasn't until it would have been the late 90s, I guess, that I played it. I had a good friend. I still have a good friend, the same friend. We're still friends. But he was my friend then, too. And his parents had a Pentium 2 computer at the time. It was brand new. And we would play all kinds of more modern games on that, like Need for Speed 2 and Star Wars Dark Forces 2 and stuff like that. But when his parents were using that computer, we would go downstairs into his basement and fire up his old 486 PC. And on that PC, we would play Sokoban. It wasn't the original Sokoban or even a legitimate Sokoban. Like you said, there were probably dozens of knockoffs of Sokoban, various kinds and at various times. So I have no idea what version of the game this was, but we would spend hours down there puzzling over those levels. And like you said, it's simple. Like the basic mechanics are simple, but it can be incredibly challenging. Some of those levels can get like absolutely devious, and we were probably like 10 or something at the time, so we could figure out some, but some were really, really difficult. So I know Sokoban, and I love Sokoban, and I have good memories of it as well. And as you pointed out, Sokoban was an example of one of those non-violent games that these days feel kind of few and far between, right? And my poor parents, my dear parents, they tried so hard to try and keep me from those violent games, and they did a good job for a long time. I had lots of those educational games that you talked about that, that everyone had, that a lot of were really, really crappy, like really awful. I had one called Jurassic Spelling that I remember, where you literally all you did was spell words, and then you got rewarded with pictures of dinosaurs, like pixelated, awful DOS pixel art of dinosaurs. And I had some better educational games as well that I enjoyed more too. But anyway, my parents tried hard for the most part, Hocus Pocus notwithstanding, to keep me away from violent games. But it was doomed to failure because I would just go over to my friends' places and play all kinds of games. They had Super Nintendos and later, PlayStation and things like that, and all kinds of great games that I didn't get at home. And one of those games was Star Wars X-Wing, and later TIE Fighter. I had another friend, different friend, but a friend that I'm also still friends with. Anyway, over at his place, he had a Mac. I think it was like a Power PC or something like that. But it could play X-Wing and TIE Fighter. And as a little kid growing up watching Star Wars, X-Wing and TIE Fighter were the ultimate Star Wars fantasies come to life. They were just amazing. They blew my mind as a kid. And for those of you who may not know, I think X-Wing came out in 94, 93, 94, somewhere in there, and TIE Fighter came out in 95. And we would have been playing it around that time, maybe shortly thereafter. And these are flight sim type games where you're flying all kinds of ships from the Star Wars universe. And they're kind of somewhere between, I guess, a simulation and like an arcade shooter, because the handling was really pretty straightforward, but you had some cool systems that you had to think about, like balancing your power between your shields and your weapon systems and your engine output. And that kind of lent this really neat feeling of depth to those games. But besides that, it was just pure Star Wars bliss, getting to fly like X-wings and TIE fighters and A-wings and B-wings and gunboats and shuttles and just all kinds of amazing spaceships from the Star Wars universe that I had as like little toys, and that sort of thing. And they had the huge like capital ships, like the massive screen filling Star Destroyers. And there was even one level I remember in X-Wing where you attack the Death Star 1, and it was the trench run. You go into the trench and you fly along and try and shoot your proton torpedoes into the thermal exhaust port. So those games were just so cool at that point in my life, and they still are, as a matter of fact. You can buy those games on Steam and on GOG.com, and they're still awesome. I think they still hold up really well. Back in the day, we would play them with this old Gravis Blackhawk joystick, which was a lot of fun. And these days, I have a more like a Thrustmaster joystick and throttle and stuff, but I still fire them up every once in a while and play them because they're nostalgic, but they're also just awesome games, and I love them to this day. So fantastic memories from my childhood playing Star Wars, X-Wing, and TIE Fighter. So that is my second game. It's technically two games, but they were pretty similar, and they came out around the same time, and in my mind I kind of lumped them together. So I'm calling that my second game. But I would really like to hear about your third and final game, Pyrit.
Oh, I can imagine how exciting it must have been to play those as a kid. They are really great games, and it's no wonder because thanks to them, kids were actually able to experience this Star Wars action, which, for many it was a dream come true. I was also able to play it, but sadly not as a child, but way later. It was like 2 years ago, and it was great. It was entertaining. It was fun to play. So I can really tell that they are really great games, even after all these years and without any nostalgic factor at all, since I haven't played as a child. But it's true that I haven't played the first game, Star Wars X-Wing, because the first game was so good. It was actually followed by 3 sequels. You have already mentioned the second game, which was the TIE Fighter. The third game was X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and then there was the last game, which is the one that I had a chance to play, which is the X-Wing Alliance, and it was great because because it is the last game, it was the most advanced and most complex and longest of them all. Anything that needed to be improved was improved, so it was really an amazing experience, and I'm sure that all the games were just amazing. So, when it comes to my third and last favorite game, it's definitely Chip and Dale, the Rescue Rangers. And this was one of the games that I haven't owned myself, but my friend did. And we all had that one friend. She had like a bunch of games, she had the newest and coolest stuff. So of course I was also very excited, like always when I had a chance to visit her. But sadly, those type of things has a really strict rules, especially when you are a kid. Um, and especially if there was like a bunch of kids and one single player game. even though we all agreed that we have one try, and after you die, you have to pass the controller to the other one. If you were like the oldest, the strongest, or the actual owner of the game, you had like infinite tries, and everyone else has just to sit there and wait until you get bored eventually. And but the Chip and Dale had one really great advantage because it was actually suitable for two players. So no waiting and no passing controller. And it was insanely good. Uh, the first reason was that at the time we were playing this game, it was the most exciting and coolest thing on earth. The Rescue Rangers were extremely popular um, at the time, so it was on TV every single day, and there was not a single child in the whole republic that would not be able to sing the whole intro song. And I woke up every day around 6 o'clock just to catch, the newest episodes and to see it all. And this game gave me the opportunity to play as my favorite characters, so you can't really get cooler than that. You can walk, you can jump, you can duck, you can pick up stuff and throw it on enemies and bosses. Like, the only complaint is that the only playable characters were the Chip and Dale. And as a little girl, I would really appreciate if Gadget was one of the playable characters, but it's not a big deal at all. And it was quite hard. It was really a really challenging game, even for two players. And but you know what? We loved it. We loved the challenge. It started a few fistfights, I'm not gonna lie, especially when, like one of us died right before the boss fight. But it was still fun, and it was also so hard because you were able to survive like three direct hits, and that was it. You lost life, you died, and there were no passwords at all. But yeah, it was exciting, it was challenging, and I loved this game. I loved it as a kid, and I love it up to this day. And I know that this is really one of the games that I can pick up and play anytime. I can play it all over again, and it's still going to be extremely exciting. So this was pretty much everything about my final game. There's really nothing else I can say. It was really nice to talk about those because they brings up so many memories, and I want to cherish those memories. I want to remember those times and to remember those games, even though they may seem stupid or old. They are a part of my childhood, and they are really important. So, and I love them. I love them all up to this day. So I'm extremely excited about your last pick.
That's really cool that you've actually played X-Wing Alliance, which is, like you were saying, the final game in that like X-Wing TIE Fighter series of games. And actually, strangely, it's the one that I have played the least of. But I have it on GOG.com, and I know that there is a huge modding community that has like reworked that game in terms of the visuals. Like they've got new high poly models and high res textures and all kinds of stuff. So because it's the most recent, it's also the one that's the best supported. by the modding community. So one of these days, I'm going to go and download all those mods and just make that game beautiful and play through it, because I'm sure that I would love it, just like I love the other ones as well. And that's really cool that your final game is Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I actually have never played the Rescue Rangers game, but I absolutely loved the Rescue Rangers cartoon when I was a kid. And I have great memories, very fond memories, of watching Rescue Rangers at my grandparents' house, along with like Darkwing Duck and all those other awesome like early 90s cartoons and that kind of stuff. And hearing what you said there and watching that bit of gameplay there, I was intrigued, and I went and looked the game up, and there was a lot of people saying positive stuff about it, that it was actually a really solid platformer for the NES. So I might fire it up, try it out one of these days, just to fill in that little piece of my gaming history that I am missing right now. So my third and final favorite childhood game was hard for me to choose. I have so many candidates, and a lot of it came along a bit later, sort of when I was 10 years old or a little bit older. Stuff like Age of Empires, Diablo, the first one, and a bit later like Morrowind. All these games that are so near and dear to my heart that I consider absolutely like formative for me. But I was thinking a little bit further back, and I think I have to give this final spot to Sid Meier's Civilization 2. The Civ series hardly needs any introduction. It's had 6 entries now, plus some spin-offs and many expansions and things like that. It is the quintessential 4X empire building strategy game, in which you have your civilization and you guide it through the ages from its very first city, from tribal days essentially, right up to the far future, or the near future, I guess. And you're fighting all kinds of other civilizations along the way, and it's got random maps and all that kind of stuff. So and the first installment in the series came out back in the late 80s, I believe, or maybe 1990. But anyway, I didn't really get on board until Civ 2, which came out in, I believe, 1995. Could have been 96, but I'm pretty sure it was 95. And this was another one of those games that I played first at a friend's house. And we would take turns sort of controlling our Civ for a few game turns, and guiding it through the ages. And it was just so cool. Just the randomized maps, and that feeling of like one more turn, just one more turn, because you have these plans that you want to see played out in subsequent turns. There's always something in those games that you're looking forward to, whether it's building your new city, or getting a particular technology researched, or building a wonder. I always loved the wonder building videos in those games, or defeating an enemy nation or something like that. They just have this really addictive quality. But those games, specifically Civilization 2, I attribute with sparking my love of history, especially ancient history, which is something that I carry to this day. And it's something that I am incredibly thankful for. And other games later were important in that as well, like Age of Empires, which I mentioned earlier, was really important in fostering that love of ancient history. But Civ 2 was sort of my first exposure to how interesting and cool history could be, even though the actual scenarios that you play out in Civ are not historically accurate, for the most part. But it sort of got me thinking about that stuff and excited about that stuff in the first place. And I like to think that, Sid Meier and Bruce Shelley and all those guys who worked on Civ originally, I think that was sort of one of their goals, was for those games to be somewhat educational. And they had the big Civilopedia built into those games with all kinds of really interesting info about the units and the buildings and the civs and stuff, as well as the big thick, instruction manuals that you would get with games back in the day that had all kinds of interesting information as well. So Civilization 2 has a very, very special place in my heart. And of course I still play the series to this day. I've played the crap out of Civ 5, and I've played some Civilization 6, not as much as I would like. I have a couple videos with it on the channel here as well, and that kind of stuff. So really special, formative game in my personal gaming history. I also wanted to just address what you said at the very end there, Pyrit, about how these games are so significant and important to you. And I completely agree. Some people will say, whatever, they're just video games, they're just toys or distractions or silly things, but I think we're seeing more and more these days that games can be and are much more than just a toy. They are sources of wonder for kids. They are inspiring and educational. I've used the word several times in this video so far, but they're formative experiences in kids' lives. And for me, these games that I talked about today are a really beloved part of my childhood and an important part of who I am to this day. They're part of why I'm here talking to you on the video right now, because they inspired my love of gaming, which carries on to this day, and more. Like I said, inspired my love of ancient civilizations, which has led to me traveling the world and seeing all kinds of this stuff, all sorts of stuff with my own eyes, because those games ignited that passion in me. So anyway, games are special, and it's so cool to have the opportunity to talk to you, Pyrit, about some of your favorite childhood games, and to talk to all of you, everybody watching, about some of my favorite games that are near and dear to my heart as well. And I would love to hear from all of you who are watching this right now. Please leave a comment down below with some of your favorite games. You can do your top 3 if you like from your childhood, because they're so broad and diverse, and there's so many amazing options and memories and experiences that people have associated with games growing up. So please do feel free to leave a comment down below about that. Thank you so much, Pyrit, for doing this collaborative video with me. It's been a ton of fun, and it was a great idea, giving us this chance to talk about this stuff. If you guys haven't had a chance to see Pyrit's stuff, once again, there is a link down in the video description, and there will be a link right here at the end of the video, maybe now, very shortly. And you should totally go check it out because it is excellent and tingly. She is a wonderful and talented ASM artist. So go check out her channel. Thank you all so much for watching this today. I really appreciate you. Really appreciate you coming on out. I hope you enjoyed it. And I look very forward to having you back here next time. Bye for now.